past July, I began a sermon on Sabbath by sharing you about my first visit to the city of Jerusalem, in which I noted that the already crowded streets of the city were filled with children in costumes. Now, I told you at that time that the reason these children were in costumes in spring, nowhere near Halloween, was a story for another time. That time has come. You see, I had arrived in Jerusalem during the Feast of Purim, which originates in the book from which our first reading today comes, the book of Esther. Esther is a fascinating book within the canon of Scripture, in part because it never mentions God. The entire story seemingly unfolds through chance, what we today might call a series of coincidences. But there's a better term for the unfolding series of events in the book of Esther: God's providence. God is deeply present in every moment of Esther's story and simultaneously hidden. That is one of the reasons children dress in costume to celebrate Purim, to remember the hiddenness of God. However, God's providence is hard to see within the tiny bit of the story we have today, which comes from the very end. So I now invite you to get comfortable in your seat, as best you can, and journey with me back to ancient Persia as we enter the story of Esther. Our story begins in the court of Ahasuerus, king of all Persia. His empire stretches from modern-day Egypt to India, and we join him at the end of a 5-month and 10-day-long feast. He has called representatives from all across the empire to join him. The wine has flowed like water. The food is sumptuous and readily available. And now we have reached the pinnacle, the culminating moment of this feast. King Ahasuerus, deep in his cups, calls forth for his queen, Vashti. She is to put the royal crown upon her head and come before the assembled men to display her beauty. Vashti says no. And Ahasuerus is infuriated. How dare she defy him? Be gone with her. We're done. Over. She is deposed. Persia has no queen. And a year passes. And Ahasuerus begins to think, perhaps it's time for a new queen. I'm guessing you have an idea who that queen might be. It is, of course, Esther. Except that's not her real name. Her real name is Hadassah. And she is a Jew, the adopted daughter of Mordecai, her cousin. She has taken the name Esther to hide her Jewishness. For she has been chosen by the king from amongst the most beautiful virgins in the entire kingdom to now sit as Queen of Persia. Mordecai instructs her to keep her Jewish nature, her Jewish identity, a closely guarded secret. Mordecai sits by the palace gates, keeping an eye on his beloved adopted daughter. And as he sits one day, he overhears a plot. A plot to assassinate the king. Quickly, Mordecai goes to Esther and tells her what is about to occur. Esther delivers the message to the king. The assassins are stopped. And the story of how Mordecai saved the life of the king is recorded in the annals of the king. Now, every good story needs a bad guy. And we have a doozy in the book of Esther. His name is Haman. And Haman is the highest ranking official in Ahasuerus' government. He sits only below the king in power and authority. And he is mighty proud of that position. Haman is vain and power hungry. And as he walks through the city, all bow before Haman and his glorious person. Except Mordecai. Mordecai refuses to bow to this Haman. And Haman burns with anger. And then he gets an idea. I will rid myself of this insolent Mordecai and everyone else like him. He goes before the king and says, "Honored King Ahasuerus, there are people living amongst us who are different. They do not act like us. They do not follow our laws as they should. Should we not be rid of these people?" Ahasuerus thinks to himself, "Haman, do as you will." And the plot is launched. Haman writes an edict and sends it out all across the empire. On the 13th day of the first month, everyone must rise up and annihilate the Jews. Every man, every woman, every child put to the sword. And when Mordecai hears of this edict, he rents his clothes, he dresses in sackcloth, he puts ashes on his head, and he sits in mourning at the city gates. Word comes to Esther of Mordecai's grief. What is wrong? What has happened? Mordecai gives her a copy of the edict and says, It is time for you to rise up and save your people." And Esther says, "No." Anyone who enters the throne room of the king without being invited is put instantly to death. And I have not been called into the presence of the king for a month. There is nothing I can do. Mordecai responds, do not think that because you live in the palace, you will be spared the coming disaster. If you do not speak, our relief will come from somewhere else. But you and your entire household will perish. Who knows? Perhaps you have come to this place, this moment, for just such a time as this. I'll do it, says Esther. I'll go before the king. And so Esther puts on her royal robes and her crown and walks towards the king's throne room. As she approaches the door, the king sees her and instantly lowers his scepter. Esther will live. Esther, Esther, my wife, what can I do for you? Up to half of my kingdom, I will give it to you. My king, says Esther, I would like you and Haman to come to a banquet that I have prepared. Okay. We already know the king likes banquets. Off they go. As they sit and feast, he asks again, what can I do for you? Up to half of my kingdom, it is yours. My king, says Esther, you and Haman come again tomorrow to another banquet I will prepare. Then I will tell you my request. And so Haman leaves the palace, his head high, for he has been invited to not one, but 2 banquets with the queen. As he walks home, he sees Mordecai, and his anger burns again. He goes home and builds a gallows, for he personally is going to take care of Mordecai. That very night, the king is troubled with insomnia. So he calls for the annals of the king to be read, for surely this book will put him quickly to sleep. But the story that is read is the story of Mordecai saving the king. What has been done for Mordecai? He asks. Nothing is the answer. Just then Haman enters the palace, and the king says, Haman, what should be done for the man the king wishes to honor? Now, of course, Haman thinks, well, it's got to be me. Of course it's me. It's me. The king should dress this man in robes the king has worn and put him on a horse the king has ridden and send an official into the streets leading the horse saying, this is what is done for a man the king wishes to honor. Great! Wonderful idea, says the king. Haman, go get Mordecai and do exactly that. And he does. table, the king says again, "Esther, my queen, what do you want? Up to half of my kingdom I will give it to you." And Esther says, "King, I ask for my life and the lives of my people." And she tells of how she, a Jew, will in short time be annihilated. "Who has done this?" rages the king. Haman. And the king explodes in anger. He sends Haman off to hang on his own gallows for his evil plotting. And Esther's people are saved. I wonder, where do you hear God in this story? I wonder, where is God in your story?